Okay, so we're going to be talking about doing the work. This is the third part in the doing the work series, and we're going to concentrate on three things: managing project changes, attack issues with the optimal action to achieve project success, and confirm approach for knowledge transfers. So, what are the enablers for this first part? Anticipate and embrace the need for change. And we have the ECO references after these. Determine strategy to handle change. Execute change management strategy according to the methodology. And determine a change response to move the project forward. We'll cover these in detail in the subsequent slides. For deliverables and tools, the deliverables will be an issues log, risk register, stakeholders register, and updated issues log. Tools that we're going to use are manage and update the issues log. So the issues log will also be a tool that we use. PMIS, which is Project Management Information System, and communication with stakeholders and negotiation with stakeholders being the tools that we'll use. So what's the change management plan? Now the definition that PMI gives, and remember, you'll probably get really frustrated with me because I'm going to keep mentioning it. This is out of the PMBOK Guide version 6. Okay. So that the test and all the lecture material is based on PMBOK Guide 6th edition, not the 7th edition. So the formal definition of a change management plan is a component of the project management plan that establishes the change control board, documents the extent of its authority, the change control board's authority, and describes how the change control system will be implemented. It also answers the following questions. This is just an abbreviated list of who can propose a change. Does it have to be a certain level or a certain role that can propose a change? Can anyone propose a change? Anyone in the development team propose a change? Or does it have to come from the business side? What exactly constitutes a change? You know, can if it's a multi-million dollar project to build a building or to pave, lay a new road, small changes such as something for a few $1,000s to say $10,000 on projects like that really aren't that much of a change at all. As long as it's not a structural change, uh, can usually be accommodated within the project budget. But it's important to lay out exactly what constitutes a change within the change management plan. Okay. Need to determine what the impact is of that change on the project's objectives. Does it change any of the objectives? Does it delay things? Exactly how does it impact the project itself? And then what steps are necessary to evaluate the change request before approving or rejecting it? You know, do you have to have a mock-up made? Do you have to have physical models made? Do you need to um, have a separate system that you're testing it with if you're talking about software? So what's the expense of doing that too? You have to evaluate that to determine whether or not that change could be accommodated. When a change request is approved, what project documents must be amended to record the actions necessary to effect the change? Okay, so determine which documents need to be updated. The project plan, definitely. Change log, definitely. What other documents need to be updated? Do you have physical blueprints for this project? Do they need to be updated? And exactly how do they need to be updated? And then how will these actions be monitored to confirm that they've been completed satisfactorily? How are you going to evaluate whether or not that change was completed satisfactorily? Any particular unique ways that needs to be tested or looked at need to be documented in the change management plan. So, some of the causes of project changes. Inaccurate initial estimates. We never see that, right? Specification changes, where um, for legal, governmental, or actually in order to have the project end up as a workable project, some specs need to be changed or the specification changes need to be adhered to. Any new regulations that have been discovered or given by, as I said, governing boards, U.S. government, state government, local government, things like that. And any missed requirements. Well, this is particularly pointing at predictive project management, waterfall type projects, where the requirements document is constructed up front and is supposed to be all encompassing. With agile projects, the requirements are developed as the project progresses. I'll change control systems that we'll use. The definition, again, it's from 6th edition of the project management guide to the PMBOK guide, is change control system is a set of procedures that describes how modifications to the project deliverables and documentation are managed and controlled. So it can include, and this is not a complete list, it can include forms if you need to fill it out, need something that needs to be filled out for a change. Tracking methods that you're going to use to verify that the change is being done and at the end that it works. The processes that will be used to enact the change. And then approval levels required to authorize or reject requested changes. And this can vary depending on the level of the change. Excuse me. So that if there are minor changes or changes that result in, say, a certain number of days worth of work, and it can be accommodated within the schedules, may need authorization at a much lower level than something that's going to affect delivery to the end customer. So always be wary of what type of change it is, and don't make it so that the highest levels of approval are required for every change. Small ones can be handled by the project team, and then the escalation has to go up whenever there are significant changes to the deliverables to the customers, especially. Now, definition of a change control board is a formally charted group responsible for reviewing, evaluating, approving, delaying, or rejecting changes to the project, and for recording and communicating such decisions. The change control board can consist of leadership for the project. It can consist of subject matter experts. It can consist of representatives from the business who are representing the customer's interests, and it can component can be the development team that's working on that particular project. Change control strategy, and this is a serial method. First, identify the change. Document the change itself so that you have a clear understanding of what the change is and can communicate that change both upward and downward. And analysis of the impact of the change so that you can do a cost benefits trade-off or evaluation when you evaluate everything. And then determining a course of action, whether you're going to proceed with the change, whether you're going to proceed with a modified change, or whether it has to be rejected. And then updating the related plans that you use. That includes the project management plan and the change plan. Now, we used to use flowcharts for everything before, but this is a change management process flowchart. We can take a look here where the change comes in on a form. The change initiators go through it. The project manager logs the change request. Then it comes into a decision point. Does the change request pass the filter? No. Then it's rejected. Okay. Send rejection notice. And then accepted. Is the deliverable affected? This, I think, should be a yes here. It shows it as a no. What it's saying is we're going to reject this, so you'd send a rejection notice. But if the deliverable is not affected, well, why would we reject it? You can also look at it, I guess, as if there's no change to the deliverable, why are we doing the change? Okay, so the yes track down here, just the things that the project manager is going to be doing, and who's going to be doing it. If it's a minor impact, the project management would most likely review the change request, and for a moderate impact, the project manager and stakeholders can get together and evaluate that proposed change. If it's a larger change, the change management board should be involved with that, or the change control board. And then if you authorize the change, proceed in building and communicating the change, executing the change, and then rebalancing the project time-wise and budget-wise. If it's not authorized, again, send a rejection notice. You can go into this in more detail on your own too. So approve change requests. And even though there's no note here, this is from version 6 of the PMBOK guide. The 6th edition of the PMBOK guide, I should say. So approved change requests are requests that have been received and approved in accordance with the integrated change control plan. So on this previous slide, this area, well, this whole thing should be documented in the change control plan. Should be able to pull it out whenever there's a change requested and just follow the process. And are ready to be scheduled for implementation. So approved changes can include a corrective action, and a corrective action occurs when the project needs to be, the change needs to be affected to keep the project in line where it's supposed to be going. Excuse me. And what we want to do is keep it in line with the project management plan that's been documented up front. Now, you can have change requests that affect the project management plan also. And then if that occurs, you need to evaluate if any other corrective actions need to be done to keep the project in line with the newly corrected project management plan. You can have a preventative action where you're looking ahead and anticipating what could happen, and do a change at this point in time to ensure future performance of the project work. It's more in line with the project management plan. Defect repair, naturally modifying a nonconformance within the project. So if you identify a defect, depending on the size of the correction, you need to go through well, any defect would go through your change control process, so that you need to document what you're going to do with minor defects, which defects you're really going to address, and what your service level agreement is for delivering your priority 1, your priority 2, priority 3, priority 4 defects, the corrections for those. And then updates, modifying a project document or plan so that if a change is necessary, or that you've discovered something that just isn't going to work, you need to go through a change management process to determine what needs to be done with the project at that point, so that you may need to modify the plans themselves for delivering the project, or some of the documentation if you've discovered something that needs to be changed. Okay. Uh, with defect repairs, in other industries other than telecommunications, such as construction, you know, the uh, the the entity delivering the project can face severe ramifications if defect repair work is improperly done. So that if you've got to make a change in a bridge support or in a foundation of a building, you you really need to go through rigorous change management in order to make sure that human lives are not going to be affected by this. So, guidelines to manage project changes are: make sure your change control system is cost effective. And that's really important to make sure that doing changes is not going to cripple your project by running out of budget. Establish or make use of existing CCB composed of project stakeholders to evaluate change requests. If there's an existing CCB, you don't have to necessarily create a new one. Take advantage of what exists today. Steal bold-facedly. Just go out there. If there's a change control board that's already been established for this project, see how you can use it. Can you augment the existing one with one or more subject matter experts and use uh, their expertise and their process without incurring additional overhead? So document the effect the change or changes will have on the applicable project baselines. Uh, you need to do this to really adjust any expectations of leadership or the project sponsors who would be affected by this. If there are changes in delivery dates, things like that, or intermediate deliveries, your leadership and also the stakeholders representing the customers need to be informed about that. Use configuration management to document and control changes to the additional product characteristics. If you're going to change it from a blue paint job to a yellow paint job, it may not matter to you, but it may matter greatly to the customer. So you need to document that. You need to document uh, also the rationale for making the changes. Uh, Coordinate changes across knowledge areas as appropriate. And for example, does the proposed schedule change affect cost, risk, quality, and or staffing? And does a proposed schedule change affect another part of the delivery team? Were they expecting a vendor to deliver something within a particular period of time because they have a certain expert who's only available during a certain window? Always check to make sure that a change doesn't adversely affect other parties that are responsible for delivering part of the project. Use performance reports to measure project performance. Uh, yeah, we need to make sure that the project is still on schedule, on budget, or whatever the approved change. If it incurs additional expenses and incurs additional time, to make sure that that's all documented too, and keep track of how the change is being delivered. So identify corrective action necessary to bring expected performance in line with the project plan. So if something has gone off track and you need a change request to get it back on track, uh, you need to identify what's necessary to get it back on track, document that, and have the change control board evaluate that. It may be that too far it's too far gone, and you may need to, in the worst case, scrap the project. So update the project plan to reflect changes made that affect performance baselines. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And then document the causes of variances, the steps taken to correct performance problems, and the rationale behind the decision-making process. And this summarizes things up here. So it's documentation, documentation, documentation. It's also transparency. Whenever you're documenting the reasons and the rationale, make sure you fully document it, um, so that others can learn from these lessons, and that you can, when you have another project like this, come back and review what you were doing at this particular point in time within this project. Any questions on this section? We don't have the activity, and we're going to move on to manage project issues. The enablers are: recognize when a risk becomes an issue, attack the issue with the optimal action to achieve project success, and collaborate with relevant stakeholders on the approach to resolve the issues. Now, hold on to your seats, because they don't list any deliverables and they don't list any tools. We're on our own on this one. Now, definition of an issue: a current condition or situation that may have an impact on the project objectives. In other words, it is an action item the project team must address. Yeah, when an issue is raised, you need to evaluate it and decide how to deal with it. So some common areas include scope change control. Well, we want to make sure that we're not just gold plating things. We need to make sure that if the scope needs to change, there is a really good reason for changing that scope, whether it's increasing the scope or decreasing the scope. Schedule control: whether or not you're able to maintain the schedule that was laid out initially, or if for some reason you need to delay the delivery or a portion of the schedule. An issue could be too that uh, you know you need to rework something also, which could impact the schedule. Cost control could be an issue if you're running over budget, especially. You need to take a look at what the overall budget for how the overall budget for the project is affected. And if you've got the project divided into segments which are funded individually, how it's going to affect that particular segment. An issue could be project variance analysis. It could be a result of that. So that if you're going through and evaluating your project, seeing how you're performing to the initial plans, and something starts to get out of control, this is an issue that needs to be identified and dealt with. Any quality issues that come up, I mean, especially on something like a manufacturing line, uh, if for some reason you're getting a large number of rejects, or if you're building a building, say a multi-story building, if you're getting welding inspectors coming back with a lot of rejected areas, you need to identify what the issue is and identify how you can correct it. Now, if you've got a risk that you've identified prior to this, if it is no longer a risk but is definitely an issue, you need to deal with that too. Issues can come up in procurement, whether it's procuring something from a vendor uh, or in using a vendor to supply personnel for that particular project. Anything like that needs to be identified. The action, you need to have action items to address those issues. And then again, in communications, uh, you need to be able to communicate the issues both to the development teams and to the partners of the team that are dealing with the end customer, and also to your leadership. Now, there can also be issues related to communications. If, for example, you have a change in leadership in your customer or in your own leadership, remember that we're with our communications plans, we want to target leadership. We want to deliver the message in the way that they will best receive it. If you have a change in leadership, either for your customer or for your own internal leadership, always take a look at what their preferred communications method is and make your changes and document them. Okay, if the new leader wants a verbal readout every 2 weeks and you've been supplying a stoplight chart every week, you've got to change some things. Okay, so that would be an issue that you'd have to deal with. Okay. So we're going to talk about risks and issues, what differentiates them. So a risk is focused on the future. We identify something that could possibly happen at some time, at some later time. A risk can be positive or negative. If a risk could be if we pour concrete when it's supposed to be the rainy season. Now, we could gain a few weeks on our delivery schedule. On the other hand, if we do get a lot of rain, the pour would be ruined, and we'd have to pour it once we got better weather. And that's what we were planning on doing for in the original project plan. Okay. When you have a risk, you need to document the risk register so that we can go back, and if the risk develops into an issue, we at least can identify when it was raised, when the risk was raised, and why we considered it to be a risk. Now, response to that is called a risk response, and it'd be most likely worth your while to just memorize this one and this one. The response for an issue is called a workaround. Okay, so issues are focused on the present. We may have had a risk before and it's turned into something that is affecting us in the present time. Issues are always going to be negative. And this may be another type of question that you'll see. Okay. Remember, risks can be positive or negative, but issues will always be negative. Know the difference and memorize that always negative refers to issues, positive or negative always refers to risks. You should have a separate issue log in which all your issues should be documented. And as I said before, a response to an issue is called a workaround. So workaround really is a technical term. Okay, an issues log. A document where information about issues is recorded and monitored. It is used to track problems, inconsistencies, or conflicts that occur during the life of the project, require investigation in order to work toward a resolution. Okay, so really what they're saying is document what the issues are. Now, this example is used to illustrate an issue. It's a log entry, okay? Let's take a look at this log entry from the perspective of project manager coming on the job day one. Say the previous project manager won the lottery and said goodbye the day before. Okay. When you're creating an issues log, truck strike to me does not fully describe what the issue is. What kind of truck strike? Okay. Where does it occur? If you've got a project that requires deliveries from all over the country or all over the state or all over the city, who is striking? And now how long do you anticipate the strike to be? Okay, open, due date, great. Priority, yep. The owner of the issue identified, which is really good. TBD on the response is only for the initial entry. One of the first things you need to identify is when the response is anticipated. You can move the dates out, at least get a ballpark estimate of when that response is going to be delivered. Status open is great. And then comments. Tasks are on the critical path. What tasks? Be as explicit as possible. Whenever you make a log entry, take the perspective of somebody just coming on the job. What does it tell them? How much information does it convey? Because when you're a project manager, your whole job is communications. So while this illustrates what an issues log can look like, try to do better. So issues need to be resolved. So as issues arrive, promptly add them to the issues log so that we can talk about it. And ideally, the issues log should be online and visible to anybody who's involved with the project. So whether you're a sponsor, whether you're a developer, whether you're someone in the business side, should be able to take a look at that issues log and benefit from the entries. Okay. Each issue should have an owner who is responsible for tracking the progress of the workaround, the corrective action, and reporting back to the project manager. And then the due date should be realistic and every reasonable attempt should be made to meet it. So you don't want to just pick a date out of midair. As I said before, if you have a TBD in there, that's okay for the initial entry. One of the first things that you have to do is determine when that issue could possibly be resolved, especially if it's a critical issue. If it's a high priority or a medium priority or a low priority. You should have a service level agreement agreed to upfront as to how long the resolution for each of those classes of issues should take. An issue should be a regular topic at every status meeting, with the goal to keep the number of open issues to a manageable number. And that's up to project manager and leadership really to determine how many issues should be open at any time and whether uh, it, whether resources, people should be diverted to correcting the issues if too many start to occur. And if you have a lot of issues, it can also indicate that the design that was specified could be wrong. So it can be implementation issues, it can be design issues, it can be documentation issues. Perhaps someone who created a requirements spec didn't capture all the requirements of the customer, or the customer didn't give you all the requirements that they expect. So issues are nothing to fool around with. They need to be identified, they need to be scoped, and they need to be attacked. And don't hesitate to escalate an issue to the project sponsor if it begins to have a major effect on the project. Again, in your communications plan, you should identify when you would be escalating to leadership or to your project sponsor any of these issues that come up? What what scope does an issue have to have before it gets escalated? Project sponsors have a lot of responsibilities outside of managing the issues of a project, so that we need to be respectful of their time, and uh, instead of raising every issue to them, understand up front what types of issues need to be raised. So some guidelines to resolving issues. Use your organization's issue log template, or in the absence of an issue log template, create an issues log. And you know, I'm sure we have a ton of templates around AT&T. Uh, Pick the one that best works with your project. Then one of the things is training project team members to promptly report potential issues to the project manager, and then the project manager will determine if they belong in the issues log. Okay. Um, some things can be very small. You don't want to record every small thing that could potentially cause like a 5 or 10 minute delay in implementing something. You will get some implementers who will be overly cautious and want everything in the issues log. This is where the project manager earns his or her salary in determining whether or not an issue belongs in the issues log. Enter the issue into the issues log and assign an owner and a due date. And then monitor progress and discuss each open issue at every project status meeting. And don't, if it's critical, don't wait until a project status meeting. If you've got to keep your fingers on what's going on with a particular issue, if it's a major issue, don't wait until that's project status meeting. Go out and seek the people who are working on it, find out how it's going, and don't take the response, oh, everything's fine. Make sure that they can quantify that. What have they done? What kind of progress have they made toward the implementation, the workaround? And go in for demonstrations too. Up front, make sure that you establish those expectations so that it's no real uh, impact to the team producing the workaround, that they need to demonstrate it. And when you're determining whether or not an issue belongs in the issue log, I mean, we're not expecting a project manager to sit in a darkened room with a Ouija board or a magic 8 ball and determine whether or not an issue needs to be in the issues log. If there's any question that you have, pull in the right people. Get some help in evaluating it. Uh, we want to do things right rather than just to do things. Okay? You might not necessarily have all the expertise that you need in order to determine whether or not an issue needs to be in the issues log. So don't hesitate to ask. Then what you're going to want to do is develop a response, also known as a workaround. So I'd know what a workaround means when you're going into the test, to the issue. Assess the impact of the response or workaround, and then approve the response or workaround. And here again, you need, for the assessment and the approval, you may need to pull in some other expertise. Never hesitate to do that. And then naturally, once the response is approved, and this really what you need to do is, for best practice, is to get a demonstration of what the response is, the workaround is. And then if it works, close the issue. Okay, we don't have the activity again. And then moving into our last topic for tonight is ensuring knowledge transfer for project continuity. The enablers for this are maintain team and knowledge transfer, discuss project responsibilities within the team, outline expectations for the working environment, and confirm approach to take for knowledge transfer. Again, no deliverables, no specific tools for this. So remember which areas don't have deliverables and tools. Okay. They may ask you on the test, what are the, you know, what's your best answer for the enablers? What tools and deliverables do you have for ensure knowledge transfer project continuity? So no to pick none. Okay. So the types of knowledge. Explicit knowledge, which is defined as knowledge that can be codified using symbols such as words, numbers, and pictures. Okay, this type of knowledge can be documented and shared with others. And it's the basis of an encyclopedia, blueprints, things like that. And then tacit knowledge. Personal knowledge that can be difficult to articulate and share, such as beliefs, experience, and insights. This type of knowledge is essential to provide the context of the explicit knowledge. You need the tacit knowledge to be able to document what that is and turn it into explicit knowledge. Now, the way I keep this straight is I remember a story that I saw, and this could be either 100% or 0% accurate. But supposedly, somewhere around 1914, at the Bath Iron Works in Maine, they were building a ship, a fairly large ship. And when they got to putting the power plant in, the power plant started knocking like anything. And they brought in, everybody from the project. They tried everything that they knew. They spent about 3 weeks on it, trying to figure out why the knocking was occurring. So they found that there was an expert it really wasn't that far away. It was in Bangor, Maine, and they brought him in. What he did was he walked up to the propulsion system there and took out a hammer and gently tapped it in about 6 areas, and it worked. Okay, he had the tacit knowledge. Okay, they got the bill. It was for $2,000. Today, that would be somewhere around $55,000 for about 5 minutes worth of work when they had been working on it for 3 to 5 weeks. They asked him about the bill, and he said, "Well, it was $2 to tap my hammer, and the rest of it was me knowing where to hit." That's the tacit knowledge. Things like that. So you need to capture things like that and then document them so that they can become explicit knowledge. Okay, let's talk about knowledge management. 3 levels: individual, project, and organization. So classifying them for project knowledge management. Each team member needs to know how to perform their work in accordance with each assigned task's scope, schedule, and cost. Okay, they need to be aware of what they need to do. They need to have the knowledge base to be able to do it. Now, required knowledge can be acquired by research on your own. It can be in collaboration with team members. It can be examining the project's or organization's knowledge repository. And it can also be through training. Uh, in software development, we have some specific tools that each team member needs to be really comfortable with. And some of those tools are fairly complicated. And rather than just throw an instruction manual at people, we used to have instruction manuals, have them do research online and go through the manual online. Sometimes we have to provide the instruction for them, a training class. For the project, the focus is on achieving the goals of the current project, so that you want to contain the knowledge. You want knowledge within the current project, enough knowledge to be able to execute to the plans. Project manager solicits knowledge about other projects that can be applied to the current project. Was there anything Is there anything similar going on? Was there something similar done in the past? Can you go to the knowledge repository and pull out some information about a project like this? Or does a peer have a project, is a peer managing a project that's very similar to yours? Project Management Office, if it exists, is an excellent source of knowledge, as it exists for the purpose of defining and maintaining standards for project management within an organization. So this is, uh, for project type knowledge, it's an excellent resource. This is an organizational level resource. Okay. So you use the organizational level resources to gain knowledge for the existing project. And then at the organizational level, focuses on managing programs or portfolios, meaning multiple projects. I mean, a program can consist of one or more projects. Again, a portfolio can consist of either one or more projects or one or more programs. Can also be thrown in there too. So the program manager or portfolio manager seeks information from peers who manage other programs or portfolios in an effort to adapt that knowledge that he gains or she gains to their specific need. Okay, so seek out people who are managing similar projects, or go to your organizational repository and pull out information concerning projects that are similar to what you're running now. And then naturally, lessons learned. And remember, we talked about retrospectives and an agile uh, effort. So lessons learned is defined as knowledge gained during a project that can be useful to subsequent phases of a project or to other projects. Now, both positive and negative experiences that occur throughout the project's life cycle need to be included in the lessons learned. So whatever you did well needs to be documented so that others can take advantage of that. And things that didn't go so well need to be documented so that others can avoid that, and you can avoid it in subsequent phases of your project. Reinventing the wheel is both time consuming and costly. So you want to be able to take advantage of the lessons that other projects or other phases of your project have given you. And then the amount of time and effort on documenting lessons learned can pay big dividends in the future. Most people take a look at documenting lessons learned as overhead and nothing else. And that's usually what it ends up if you don't look at it again. But the thing is that you can learn a lot from the mistakes that you make. Failure is the best teacher that's ever been invented. So if you've learned something from a failure especially, please document it. Make it available to everybody else. It isn't a bad thing to fail. The only bad thing is not learning from your failure. So we need to encourage leadership to take that type of attitude that you don't punish failure, you learn from it. Okay? And that's what we want. A good project manager will do that. Okay, some considerations of lessons learned. Scheduling lessons. Did a particular tool work or didn't work? What kind of assumptions did we make on the schedule up front that didn't come true? Okay, where could we have shortened the schedule? What caused the schedule to be extended? Conflict management lessons learned. You don't yell. You might learn that you don't yell in certain meetings, and with other meetings, yelling is the only way you get things done. But how you go about mitigating any conflicts between any two parties involved, any two or more parties involved with the delivery of that project should be documented. I mean, that's a lessons learned. How did you address this? What worked? What didn't work? Now, what parties were involved? And why didn't your approach work? Vendor lessons learned. Did you find that a vendor, even though they promised to deliver, was always 2 weeks late? 2 weeks being the standard unit of time within a software project. Did the vendor, um, did the vendor insist on being paid sooner than the contract specified? Things like that. And also, was the vendor, were you able to negotiate with the vendor or not? These types of things need to be in the lessons learned so that others don't get trapped by the same things. Any of the customer lessons that you learned, and does the customer uh, expect more than was in the specifications? Do they want you to deliver sooner than you committed to? Things like that. Do they not pay on time? Strategic lessons learned. Um, you know, will does this particular project that you're working on fit into the long-term strategy for the enterprise? No, or doesn't it? Why does it? Why doesn't it? Okay. These are things that can benefit other projects. Any of the tactical lessons that you learned need to be documented. And then the catch-all, other aspects of lessons learned. Okay. So anything that caused you to take an action, consider that a lesson learned. Okay. It can be a positive reason or a negative reason, and the outcome can be positive or negative. So you also need to document the good lessons that you learned. For example, if you're in a meeting with a particular customer, if you find out that that particular customer wants to hear doesn't want to hear any negatives within that uh, particular meeting. Not the best thing. I, and it's a lesson learned, especially if you deliver them a negative message and they blow their stacks. Just things like that need to be in the lessons learned log. Okay. Difference between a lessons learned register and a lessons learned repository. A lessons learned register is a project document used to record knowledge gained during a project so that it can be used in the current project and entered into the lessons learned repository. And then the repository is a store of historical information about lessons learned in projects. And they show, project A that you're working on has a lessons learned register. Then it goes with all the other projects in the lessons learned repository. You can also think about this, if you're old enough to remember, filing cabinets. The repository would be the filing cabinet, and each of the lessons learned registers would be a file within that filing cabinet. Just some way to keep it straight. Okay. So project responsibilities within the team. We have leadership, facilitation, political awareness, and networking. And these responsibilities are within the team here. Leadership is what you need to do is communicate the organization's vision and inspire the project team to focus on the goals of the project. And what is really effective is if you bring in your project leadership every once in a while just to articulate these points to the entire team so that they understand that what they're doing is valuable and that it's within the vision of whatever within the vision of the department or within the vision of the enterprise itself. Okay, project manager has to be a facilitator too, to effectively guide a group to a successful solution to a problem. Facilitation also needs to be at the team levels, within any level within the project. Team members should be able to be facilitators also. Political awareness, and this isn't Republican, Democrat. We're talking about the political situation, the political environment within the organization to keep, especially the project manager, aware of what the organization's political environment is like. And then networking also. And that's to facilitate relations among project stakeholders so that knowledge is shared at all levels. So stakeholders can be anywhere from leadership through the implementation teams. We want people to be talking with each other. We want to be able to share knowledge and be a synergistic enterprise where we can build off of each other's ideas, successes, and failures. And then working environment expectations. One of the biggest things that you need to remember is knowledge is not constant. The best we know today is most likely less than we'll know tomorrow. And what they say is what we knew yesterday can change based on what we did today. So, I mean, the key to learning is building on what you know today. Learn something new, build upon what your expertise is today, and keep building and keep building. So there are times where you take a look back and just smack your forehead and say, why did we specify it like this when we could have done it a different way, like this thing? Okay. But at the time that you specified it, it was the best you knew. That was the best solution that you could come up with. So that's why we have change control process, so that we can change how we implement things, change what the product is going to look like when we deliver it. Okay, based on the knowledge that's your best knowledge at that point in time. So whenever you suggest a change request, that's the best you know. Always give the best you know at any point in time. And then continuously evaluate the project environment for new risks and follow the risk management process to proactively address them before they become issues that will affect the project objectives. So remember, risks can be positive or negative. You want to, if you identify, evaluate the project environment, identify any new risks, and then try to proactively address them before they become issues. And remember, an issue is always negative. Okay? And negatives will affect the project objectives and the timeline. Okay? Don't hoard knowledge. Be transparent. Follow the communication management plan and inform stakeholders of changes affecting their work. Don't hold things back. It's easier and more effective to address a problem when it first occurs. Don't let it fester. Use appropriate tools to share knowledge with stakeholders. Now, these first two, face-to-face during formal meetings and face-to-face during informal meetings and discussions, this is what you need to know for the test. Don't second guess yourself based on the way the environment is today. This is what they're testing on. So, and especially at AT&T, we're still 99% virtual meetings. Okay? We're not doing face-to-face. I mean, you can consider WebEx calls, if you have the camera, any of the calls that we do with the camera turned on can be considered like a face-to-face meeting. Think of it that way, rather than something that's remote. Okay? You use the telephone, email, wikis, intranet, and even Printed documents. Don't see too many of those anymore. Printed documents you can also consider to be electronic documents. Okay. Just print it to a PDF. Ship that around. And then the knowledge transfer approach. Definition: knowledge transfer consists of connecting individuals in person or virtually to share tacit knowledge and collaborate together. This is where you get the most done. What you want to be able to do is put together your subject matter experts to address an issue or a problem. And in general, just to share their knowledge. Experience in one area may transfer over to a different area where it may not appear that way up front. Okay. Techniques include networking, just getting people together, whether it's virtually or face to face or, at a bar. Facilitating special interest groups. And we have things in the Agile world called communities of practice, where people who are interested in or involved in certain aspects of delivering value to the customer get together and share their war stories and look for help from other people. Meetings, seminars, and various other types of in-person and virtual events that encourage people to interact and exchange ideas and knowledge. This includes webinars too, so that you do have the opportunities while sitting at your desk to participate in webinars or seminars and any other meetings too. So that what you really want to be able to do is share the best that you know and acquire the best that other people know. And then one interesting thing too is work shadowing and reverse shadowing. Then those provide a more individualized method to exchange the work of method to exchange specialized knowledge. So if you've got somebody who's been doing a job for the last 20 years, they're an expert in it, well, pair them up with somebody who's new to the game and get that knowledge transferred. I was just in a town hall meeting. I think it was yesterday or the day before, and they had a list of people up on my screen that were retiring at the end of this year, and literally the hundreds and hundreds of years of experience that are going to be walking out the door is just staggering. So what you want to be able to do is have a newer generation pick up the expertise that an older generation, and I'm not talking just age, I'm talking about people who have worked in a particular competency. Say somebody who's been working in billing for 20 years. You want somebody to be able to pick up those nuances, things that aren't necessarily written down, that can be conveyed to somebody who's just picking it up. Okay. And then guidelines to maintain team and knowledge transfer. If your organization has a project management office, follow its guidelines on documenting new knowledge. So you may have a prescribed method of doing it. If you don't, then you need to create one. So be alert to new sources of project knowledge and follow the communications management plan to convey that knowledge to stakeholders. If you see in an external publication something that's relevant to your project, if somebody's made a breakthrough, if there's a new product that can be used on your project, you need to make people aware of that. Proactively seek new knowledge. Don't just sit back. Go out there, read the trade journals, the online, the blogs, the wikis that are available with anything that's concerned with your project. My experience was that I was reading, it was a physical newspaper that came out every week. It was Electronic Engineering Times. and I saw about a ½ inch or 1 inch uh, blurb about this company that was doing a specific thing. They were in Ireland, and I saw it and raised it up, and the company that I was with uh, made a bid to acquire that company just based on that little bit of information. Well, we did a lot of investigation into what they were doing. We did a lot of checking on their expertise, and it turned out that it was fairly impossible for a U.S. company to acquire it because of how they were structured based on the Irish Management Board's funding. But just a 1 inch blurb in a trade rag, caused us to pursue buying the company. Now we used them a good bit, so there was a lot of expertise, a lot of knowledge that was transferred between the two companies as a result of that. So you never know what's going to trigger something. And then compile the lessons learned register throughout the project's lifecycle and add it to the lessons learned repository with registers from other projects. So the learning goals for this entire section were to assess and manage risks, execute the project with the urgency required to deliver business value, manage communications, engage stakeholders, create project artifacts, maintain project changes, attack issues with the optimal action to achieve project success, and confirm approach for knowledge transfers. Okay. They also have the reflective questions that you can consider. So any questions on any of this material?
I have a question, and perhaps you covered and I missed it. There was one section that you said that risks can be positive and negative.
Yep.
Why would it be positive?
You may be able to, what I was, the example that I used, it wasn't a great example, was you have say you're constructing a new section of road and you need to pour concrete to do that. Now, you have a risk may be the weather that occurs when you're scheduled to pour. So it can be positive if it doesn't occur, or if it's the weather forecasters say that it's going to occur later. It can be a severe risk if it can become an issue. A risk that would be negative would be that the weather would prohibit pouring of the concrete until a time where it really does affect the project schedule.
I see. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay, Tim, are you ready?
Hi. Yeah. So I have been mentoring for many years, and I've become a lecturer. I always share with my students where my experience on taking the PMP exam. I took my PMP exam when it was 2012. I know a lot of things have changed, but I would like to give you some tips that I experienced. Pacing is really important for the exam. It's 4 hours long, and you don't have any breaks. And I failed the first time because of the pacing, and also the first time I had a big dinner, and I got the butterfly in the stomach during the day of the exam. So be careful what you do the day before. And because the restroom breaks, those are your time also. Those are within those 4 hours. And another thing is when you take the exam, is in a room. The first time I took the exam, I sat very close to the door, so that really bothered me because people comes in and out. When you're taking the exam, they were coming in and out, opening and closing the door. That really affected me. So the second time I took it, I sat right in the back in the corner where it was nice and quiet, where I can focus on taking that 4-hour exam. Yeah, these two are my biggest tips that I share with my students.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. Anyone have any comments or anything that you want to share with the rest of the team here? Like how you're going to deal with getting 40 minutes back tonight? Okay. If there aren't any more questions, I'd like to thank you for participating this evening, and best of luck when you take the exam. I'm going to stop the
Thank you.
recording at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.